Hello and thank you for joining. My name is Craig Irvin and you're watching part 3 of VBScript to manage and set specific attributes in Active Directory. And in part 3 we're going to cover generating log files. So to go over what we've done so far, in part 1 we set up a connection to Active Directory as well as displayed the distinguished name attribute to the console screen. In part 2 we then took the distinguished name attribute and pulled out using a regular expression the account information that we're going to need to set it to the extension attribute1 value. Now in part 3 we're going to start creating log files, and in this particular case we're going to have two log files that record changes done to actual objects, and then we're going to have in the second log file recording some statistics whenever a change is actually made. Also, we're going to check to see if if either of the log files exist, and if it doesn't, we're going to write the header information, which is essentially allowing us to explain to a person who doesn't know about these two log files what the actual data is for each column. So here's some other information just want to cover real quick. Environment requirements and script end result goals. They are both covered in part 1, which on YouTube it's Vid0007. So in log file 1 we're going to record changes done to any Active Directory object. So essentially this gives us the way to audit to make sure that our script is running the way it's supposed to, but also be able to provide auditors information of whenever objects are actually changed, at least for the script's sake. And we're just going to record a couple values, date, time, as well as the name of the object that was changed. We're going to use common name. This will not be covered in this part. It will actually be covered in the next part, which would be part 4. We're mainly only worried about setting up the log file and getting it ready to record the final information. Also, we're going to record what the old value was, and if it was blank, we'll insert blank as the original value, which is also going to be covered in part 4. And if it has an existing value, then we're going to show what that value was, and then the final thing that we're going to record is what the new value was set to. In log file 2, we're going to cover recording some script stats, and I'm only doing this just to show how it's done. I don't know how important it would be for later on in the future, but I can see that the benefit out of this is when you record how long a script took to complete, then you could see that some inefficiencies happening whenever you get a lot of objects created inside Active Directory, and it may make you readjust how often the script is ran, or maybe revisit how the script is written and write it more efficiently so it can run quicker. In the particular case when this is used, we would set up a scheduled task that would run this every 5 minutes or so. And obviously if the scheduled task is running every 5 minutes but the script is taking 6 minutes to complete, then essentially the script never completes. It's always rerunning and overwriting some of the stuff that it's already doing. So it's good probably to record this information even though you can get by without it. Alright, here we are at the actual script. I'm going to go ahead and start explaining a few of these items that we've added into part 3. Essentially here, the start time, we're going to record as soon as the script executes. Obviously this is after our declarations here. The rule is basically that this particular variable set to now cannot be above this dim statement here. So if you wanted to and get the true start time or close to it, you can always move this dim start time at the very top and then put this right below it. But since we're only talking a few milliseconds of doing all of this, there's really no need to juggle things around. The next piece is we're going to initialize all of our variables to 0 that are going to record the different stats of total records, change records, and unchanged records. And keep in mind that part 3 doesn't cover all of this, but we're still going to go ahead and get this taken care of and get them initialized to 0. Now, the big piece is the initialization of the file, actually opening it and setting the first line to the header information. If you decided to not write the header information, which are this write statement here and the write statement here, you have a few alternative ways of doing this. But just to go ahead and go through this, essentially what we're doing is we're creating two variables, change log and execution stats, and we're setting it to a path, which can be a UNC path, or it can be a actual hard-coded path to like the C drive and some temp directory or whatever. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and save it to a hidden directory called changes on our domain controller. This constant is essentially makes it easier later on to understand what's being done to log file when you open it. So if you see, we're going to open up the log file and we're going to append to it. If you look this up, you can change this to overwrite the existing file all the time, which in this particular case isn't a good idea because this is a ongoing report that you're running of all changes done. So if you overwrite the file, you're going to lose everything that was done the last time the script ran. And then here, this is going to allow us to set up the log file, and if the file doesn't exist, then we're going to immediately open up the log file and then write the header information. If it does exist, then we're just going to open up the log file. The second log file, which is going to be the execution stats. Now if we scroll down to the main subroutine that's going to wind up doing everything for us, or a majority of the things, the only thing that you're going to see right now is that I'm doing total records. So as soon as I enter in to the do until statement, I'm going to increment the total records by 1. So I hit the first object, the total record currently is set to 0, and as soon as I enter into this do until, which represents the very first object, we're going to take total records and then increment it by 1, which equals the new total records. And in part 4, you'll see this all come together with the remaining statistics that we're going to record. And then down here, we're going to have the write to log file routine created. And then finally at the very bottom, we have the stop time, and we do another now. And then in order to get the execution time, we just basically do a date diff. This is telling it to do it in seconds, and we're taking the start time and stop time, which gives us our execution time, which then is recorded in the execution stats by going to the log file 2, and we're going to write out these lines here. And then some of the extra stuff, just to see it work when we run it manually from the command prompts, I went ahead and put in some echo statements to show some of this stuff. And most are going to return 0. Execution time will sometimes return 0 because there's really not many objects in Active Directory. So it's going to return 0 most of the time, but every once in a while you'll see it return 1 second. And then the most important piece to remember if you're opening up files is that you need to remember to close them. Otherwise, the next time the script runs, the file will be open and it will not be able to write to those log files. So always remember to close your log files. And then the last piece is just setting all your variables to 0, which I've said before isn't really necessary, but sometimes good practice to do. In part 4, we're going to cover how to set the extension attribute 1 value. And then we're going to put in the rest of the logic that's needed to actually record some of the remaining log file information that you'll see that we're not doing in part 3. And here are some ways that you can find us.